Hi, this is Teddy, and you're listening to Alicia Garza on Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Demcast Podcast Network.
Are you listening?
Hey everyone, this is Kelly Pollack with Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Demcast family of podcasts, and I am thrilled today to be joined by Alicia Garza. It would take me probably the whole time if I listed all of your accomplishments, but Alicia is the co-founder of the Black Lives Matter Global Network, a strategy and partnerships director with the National Domestic Workers Alliance, the principal of the Black Futures Lab, and a co-founder of Supermajority. So hi, Alicia.
Hi, good morning.
So thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. 2020 has been off to quite a boom so far. So
that's an understatement.
Yeah. But I wanted to maybe start some by talking about the Black Futures Lab, that maybe the sort of piece of what I just said that some people might not know as much about. Could you talk some about what the Black Futures Lab is, and then about the Black Census Project that you did?
Yeah, so, I feel like in 2016, it took me a while to uncurl myself out of the tightly wound ball that I think most of us were in, right? And, the year itself was really complicated and full of lots of ups and downs and twists and turns. And sometimes for me, when I am feeling like there's chaos all around me, I spend a lot of time imagining what I would do if I had, full control over strategy and approach and tone and engagement. And that's really where the Black Futures Lab comes from for me. We work at the Black Futures Lab to make Black people powerful in politics. We believe that the challenges that face our communities are incredibly complex, and to resolve them, what they require is innovation and experimentation, but most of all, solving the challenges that face Black communities require Black political power. And so that's what we've set out to do. We're about to turn 2 years old. And when we launched in 2018, we started with a project called the Black Census. And really, the problem that we were trying to solve is that Black communities are often spoken about, but rarely engaged with. And so that means that campaigns and candidates engage with our communities largely in symbolic ways, without even talking to us or engaging with us deeply about the issues that shape our lives. So we set out to talk to as many Black communities as we could across the United States. And we ended up conducting the largest survey of Black people in America in 155 years, touching more than 30,000 respondents in all 50 states, engaging people online, and then, of course, motivating and activating a whole field program through partnerships with about 23 grassroots organizations in 28 states who are rooted in Black communities of various types. And what we found was really incredible. One, the most common thing that we heard from our respondents was that nobody had ever asked them what they think, what they imagine for their futures, or what are the issues that are most important to them. That doesn't bode well going into what I think is one of the most important election cycles in our lifetime. And finally, the thing that I thought was really fascinating is that, oftentimes when candidates or campaigns do engage Black communities, they are engaging us around whatever hot button issue is at the top of the news cycle. And so often when we talk about Black communities, people use criminal justice reform as a euphemism for what's happening with us. But we found that actually the number one issue that was keeping Black families up at night was the issue of low wages that are not enough to support a family. So all in all, what we're doing with this data is both, making it available to grassroots organizations, campaigns, and candidates to be able to better understand what's impacting Black communities across the country. And we've also translated the data into a Black political agenda that we're calling an agenda for a Black future, using that as a tool to activate, motivate, and engage and turn out Black communities in advance of an incredibly important election.
So when I was reading through the report, one of the things that's very striking is the role of gender in the way that people feel about what they need, what they want, the way they're being treated. Could you talk some about this focus on gender and what you sort of see as those really salient points that came out of that?
Absolutely. I mean, we released 3 reports on the data so far, and all of those reports can be found on our website at blackfutureslab.org. We found that it was really important once we collected all this data to make it accessible to not just campaigns and candidates, but make it accessible to our communities as well. And so one of the reports that we did, the first one we released, really looked at what the most politically engaged Black folks who responded to the survey wanted and thought about what were the most important issues in their lives. But also we got a sense of what are the ways in which Black communities are politically engaged. We then went and released a report that looked at the data through the lens of sexuality. So disaggregating the data to look at respondents who were identified as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or an other sexuality besides heterosexual. And there we found, right, that the ways in which Black communities were being impacted by issues was actually sharpened when you looked closely at Black communities that also have other identities that they're experiencing and dealing with in the economy, in our democracy, and in our society. Our gender report, which is called Beyond Kings and Queens, was really important to us because there's a lot of conversation out there about how important Black women are to the kind of electoral process. We know that this is true. We know that elections in this country are decided in a lot of ways by what Black communities do generally and what Black women do specifically. But we also thought it was important to look at the ways in which gender is a spectrum in our communities and how that gender spectrum actually impacts the ways in which people experience issues. So just to be specific, when we talk about Black communities, just like Black communities are not just African American, right? Black people who are born in the United States. We also thought it was important to make the point that Black communities are not just cisgender. So cisgender being people who identify with the gender that they were assigned at birth. We know that Black communities are also transgender and gender nonconforming. And we saw that there were a lot of nuances and differences amongst Black communities and looking at the intersection of gender, particularly when it came to this question of how we understand what are problems that impact the Black community. So while we saw that there was a lot of alignment, for example, across the board about the issue of low wages being something that keeps people up at night, about the lack of accessible and affordable health care being a number one issue that people are facing in their lives, we also found that, for example, cisgendered Black men and cisgendered Black women were less likely to identify violence against transgender women as a problem. That's concerning given, right, that, each year for the last 6 years, we've had more visibility around the ways in which Black trans people are experiencing an incredible level of violence. And certainly just last year, we had more than 20 Black trans women who were killed across the country. And then, of course, more than 350 that were killed globally. What is also true is that we found that there are a lot of stereotypes about what Black people think is important that impacts the ways in which candidates and campaigns engage our community. For example, there has been a lot of conversation about the ways in which Black women show up to vote, Black cisgendered women show up to vote, but less about the fact that Black cisgender men show up to vote at comparable rates and tend to vote along the same progressive lines that Black cisgendered women vote along. You might be surprised to know that Black cisgender men very highly support the question of reproductive justice, very highly support the question of having access to abortion and other forms of health care. Black cisgender men in particular aren't seen as supporting autonomy, right, for Black cisgender women or for Black people who can bear children. However, not understanding that, right, means that we may leave Black cisgender men behind when we're thinking about the types of coalitions that we need to build in order to win progress on the issues that we care about and that are impacting our communities. However, one of the things that we do know to be true, and we will be releasing a report on this in the first quarter of this year, one of the things that we do know to be true is that Black cisgender men can actually act as what we call swing voters around particularly polarized wedge issues that our opposition tries to use to break the level of cohesion that Black communities have when it comes to voting and engaging in the political process. For example, we do find that there are still high rates of support for immigration reform and for decent immigration policy, and that is across the board, whether you look at it through the lens of gender or sexuality. However, we do find that when it comes to questions of the economy, right, that Black cisgender men are less likely to support interventions in the economy that involve the government, right? And that means everything from setting a minimum wage, a higher minimum wage, to other interventions that kind of would go across the board that are activated by the government. That's important because there is a way in which being galvanized around the challenges in the economy can break the stronghold, right, that Black people seem to have over deciding issues in cities and states that improve the lives of everyone, and in particular Black communities. We can be incredibly susceptible to messages that the only way to fix the economy is to let corporations run it. We can be susceptible to the messages that immigrants and immigration is the reason that the economy is in the toilet, right? And so we can be susceptible to these messages that say that there's somebody else to blame for the problems that we're facing. And that's why an organization like the Black Futures Lab is important. We take very seriously the notion that if we don't engage Black communities around the issues that are important to us, we leave it for our opposition to do, and that is very much at our peril.
So what sort of response have you been getting to this? Obviously there's going to be some groups that are going to take this information and really care and really engage with it. Are you finding that, politicians and big organizations that you want to make sure are mindful of these, are they responding? Are they listening? Is there some progress being made there?
We are finding progress. And in fact, last year we regularly talked to 4 of the major presidential campaigns to explain, right, what was going on in our Black Census Project and how it could be useful for their campaigns. And we've been reached out to by a number of campaigns about how they can access and better understand this information. And so we've been spending time doing that. But also, what we hope, right, is that it doesn't just stop with the data, but that actually campaigns and candidates investigate the ways in which we collected the data in the first place. I mentioned earlier that the data was collected using both online and offline methods. And I think the work that we're the most proud of is the work that we did offline. We engaged 23 Black-led grassroots organizations that were rooted in communities that often don't get surveyed or often get left out of the political process. Black communities that are rural, Black communities that are currently and formerly incarcerated, Black communities that are some other gender besides cisgender, Black communities that are born in the U.S. and born outside of the United States. And we really worked to make sure that not only were people being asked to take a survey, but they were also being asked to join a movement. And I think that every candidate and campaign can really benefit from that level of understanding around what does it mean to transform the way that governance happens in this country. We're not just interested in turning people out election cycle to election cycle. We're much more interested in the process of how it is that Black communities get engaged and stay engaged in the decisions that are impacting our lives and the lives of our families and the people that we love.
Would you have recommendations for individuals, so not just groups, but for individuals who want to be better allies, want to be better at communicating this information? You know, I feel like there's a lot of sort of shouting on Twitter, sometimes by white women, like, listen to Black women, and that's great, and that's good advice, but that could mean a lot of different things. So, what would you say to people like me who want to do the best job we can, but aren't always sure what that means?
I would say that it's really important to understand how critical your votes are. So we know that Black communities have been doing what we're supposed to be doing for a very long time. We vote in a very practical and pragmatic manner. And while that vote is powerful, it's only as powerful in as much as we are joined by people who are both experiencing the disastrous effects of a corporate-run economy, of an unaccountable government, and a democracy that is rapidly transforming into being some other form of governance. We are only as strong as those people for whom these systems were built, showing up and standing in solidarity with communities around whom these systems were designed to keep us out and to keep us left behind. And so, sure, we can stand with Black women all we want, but if that doesn't mean that when we go into the voting booth or when we drop our ballot into the mail and that we're not actually voting with our values, right, then really it's a symbolic action. It's easy to say stand with Black women, but I think we want to just see in real time, what does it mean for white women? What does it mean for white men to actually stand with Black women and say, we think that this country deserves better and we think that we deserve better. And so we're not going to let our fears, our economic anxieties, nor our social ones shape the way that we take courageous steps into the future. I think in 2016, a lot of people assumed that because there was a woman at the top of the ticket, that white women in particular were going to support the woman who was the top Democratic candidate. What we found, in fact, was that race trumps gender, no pun intended, and that white women, particularly evangelical white women, voted right against their own material, social, and economic interests. And so I think if we don't want to see a repeat of that again, it's time for us to have an honest conversation about the gap that sometimes exists, right, between what we say in public and what we do in the voting booth. And it's time for us to start enacting strategies that are really listening to the anxieties of these communities and starting with them where they are, but helping to lead them to a different conclusion. That's going to be our task for 2020.
Yes, we have a lot of tasks for 2020, I think. So speaking of that, and that's a good segue, I think, to the work that you're doing with Supermajority, which is super exciting to me. Supermajority is super exciting. But could you talk some about what that looks like? And I was just especially thrilled when Supermajority was sort of first burst onto the scene to see that there was such an important group of organizers, a very diverse and important group of organizers that was leading it. So would you talk a little bit about what Supermajority is doing in 2020, moving toward this election?
Supermajority was designed to do what I just discussed. There are so many women out here who are pissed off after the 2016 election, just to make it very plain, and who honestly are living in communities where they feel isolated. They're living in communities where they're wondering, am I the only person that cares about these things? How did we get to the outcome that we got to in 2016? I thought that I and the people that I love would stand up for me and would stand up for us and would stand up for this country. And so as we move into 2020, I think Supermajority was really designed to be a new political home for women's activism. What we find is that when women are connected, when women are given the opportunity to learn from each other, and when women are activated, there's nothing that can stop us. I think it's pretty clear that 2020 will be both the year of Black people and the year of women. And at the intersection there, 2020 will be the year of Black women deciding what happens in this upcoming election cycle. But one of the things, of course, that can get in the way is the isolation that people feel, the anxiety that people feel around wanting to build connections, but worried that they'll do it wrong or make a mistake. And so, Supermajority is really about the fact that women are not only the majority of voters in this country, we're the majority of political donors in this country, but yet we don't have a majority of political power in this country. And that's the equation that we're trying to change. And so we're trying to provide, and not trying, we are providing a home where women can take action together and be powerful together. Our big, hairy, audacious goal for this year is to activate the largest woman-to-woman voter contact program this country has ever seen, engaging and activating 2 million women in advance of November. And so I think for us, the way that we know that this is something that women are hungry for is because in the first month of us existing and having launched, more than 200,000 women and their friends signed up and raised their hand and said, yes, I want to build a country that ensures the dignity of women and our families. And I pledge, myself to use my own superpowers to build the kind of supermajority that is not just going to make women powerful in this country, but it's going to change the way that power operates.
And furthermore, I should note that the Supermajority tote bag I have is the single best tote bag I've ever owned.
It's so good. We do have to talk about how it's the perfect size. It's like not too small, but not too big. And it's just so cute. I really do. It's one of my favorites.
So in the survey of women that Supermajority did, one of the questions that everyone was asked was, what's your superpower? So Alicia, what's your superpower?
So you'd be interested to know that the number one superpower that people who took that survey identified was empathy. And that just every time I think about that, it makes the hairs on my arms stand up straight. The fact that most people who said, my power is the power to care for others the way that I care for myself is pretty awesome. I will add to that and say that my superpower is the ability to have strong boundaries and also a soft heart.
I love that.
Thank you.
I think the strong boundaries is something that all of us could do a better job at. Me, at least. I could do a much better job at.
Probably. We're getting there, though. This is our year to work on it.
Yes. Is there anything else that you want to make sure that we talk about?
I don't think so. I think if anybody who's listening wants to get involved in this new community for women and a new home for women's activism, you can come and find us at supermajority.com. It's 100% free to sign up, and you won't be sorry that you did. And then, of course, if you're interested in learning more about the Black Futures Lab, come holler at us at blackfutureslab.org.
And listeners, if you ever get a chance to see Alicia talk in person, do it.
Thank you.
I think that 2019, I felt like I hate the word woke, but I felt kind of woke, before even 2016. And then definitely after 2016 felt like I was learning and growing a lot. And I really feel like 2019, I'm not going to pretend I have it all figured out now. But I think 2019 taught me how much I didn't know still, events like going to Netroots and things like that just sort of was really eye-opening to me to the number of factors and things that I had never considered. We didn't even get to talk about your work with Domestic Workers Alliance, but, just a whole category of workers that I had just not thought that much about. And so I think, hopefully 2020 will be the year that I also can figure out even more what I don't know and try to really learn a lot more and listen and grow.
Oh, well, from your lips to God's ears, I think that can happen.
Well, Alicia, thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. It's been a true pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so much for having me, and I hope we get to talk again soon.
Thank you for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Dimcast Podcast Network. Our theme song is called Are You Listening off of the album Elephant Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and was created for use by this podcast. You can contact us at twobroadstalkingpolitics@gmail.com or on Twitter or Facebook at twobroadstalk. You can find all of our episodes at twobroadstalkingpolitics.com or anywhere podcasts are found.